Speaking truth and power, unlocking minds, one day at a time, day at a time. Speaking truth and power, unlocking minds, one day at a time, day at a time. Truth of the matter is that truth really matters, yeah. Truth of the matter is that truth really matters, yeah. In the beginning, I was back and forth like Batman, lacking wisdom, no direction for proper decisions. I heard my bro had a show, so I started to listen. Truth of the matter, ain't no comparing the competition. The kid feeling blessed, cause it's clear as when Dex. After talking with Dex, I know just where to step. I know the path gon' be narrow, but my eyes on the sparrow. And the truth of the matter is that truth really matters. Truth of the matter, that truth really matters. Hey.
All right. Hey, what's going on, everybody? I hope that this message finds you all doing well. I want to say thank you all again for joining me once again as we dive into what I believe is a very vital and important subject matter. Last week, we began this conversation around the topic and the focus of overcoming the epidemic of fatherlessness. If you were not able to catch that message, what I would ask that you would do is maybe go on YouTube, type that in, Overcoming the Epidemic of Fatherlessness, and you should see my profile. Also, if you're one who maybe listens to things by way of podcast, I want to encourage you to check out the Truth of the Matter podcast. Make sure it's the one that says Dexter Peggins. And you should be able to catch last week's message, or at least part one of this conversation. I'm going to do my best to do a really quick recap before we dive into what we're going to talk about on tonight. So last week, we laid the foundation for this series, Overcoming the Epidemic of Fatherlessness. As I stated last week in the conversation, we used the term epidemic very intentionally. And what we said is that it's a medical term and is recognized as the rapid spread of a disease to a large number of people in a given population within a short period of time. Why is that significant with respect to this conversation? Because within the span of 50 years, now 50, the single parent household, the percentage went from 7% to 25%. So what you have is literally 1 in 4 households are actually governed by a single parent. Now, out of that 25%, 20% is normally comprised of a mother raising the children, and then the other 5 is the single father raising the kids. And so that's the correlation between the epidemic portion, the rapid spread over a short period of time. Because once again, what you have is you have the number of single parent households increasing from 7% to 25% in less than 50 years. Now let's tie in the disease portion of that thought process. We said that a disease is a harmful deviation from the normal structural or functional state of an organism. So here's the deal. A family is an organism. It's a living thing. And so at the heart of what I'm saying, as we tied it together, at the heart of what I'm saying is that fatherlessness is a disease because it's a deviation from the family structure. Now, here's the thing about a disease. It corrupts the integrity of the organism by spreading. And if unchecked, it eventually will kill the host. The potential to kill the host is there. Now, I mentioned that the inspiration for this book, the book that I'm going to be referencing a lot, Dear Son, the inspiration of my book came from the 4th chapter of Malachi, verse 6. In the 4th chapter of Malachi, verse 6, it says, and he will turn the hearts of the father to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with a curse. And we gave a few examples last week of what a curse can be considered. A few of the examples from last week, we said that a curse may be the lack of direction. And so what that means is you have a man who, because he doesn't know how to lead his family, ultimately he's in a position where there's no direction, there's the ability to guide his family is off track. The curse may be having a mental and emotional breakdown because the father never showed that man how to properly deal with the pressures of life in a healthy manner. And here goes again, the pressures of life. The curse may be that when those pressures do come, that man is tempted to quit, or that he does quit because he didn't learn how to pace himself, nor did he have someone to teach him how to have the right perspective about any given situation. And here's the I guess I would say the the ultimate curse, and I'll just say it that way. The real curse, let me put it that way. The real curse is um, what I mentioned earlier about the disease and how it spreads, and ultimately it has the potential to kill the host. Um, you know, ultimately what happens is that uh, with this curse, it's killing off the family structures for generations to come because it's going unchecked. And so what you'll have is that you'll have men who learn to disappear under the weight of pressure because their first example, their first teacher of manhood left. And now leaving becomes the normal behavior. And so that's what we see as a curse. What you have is you have men who have come to learn and understand that this is just the way we do things. When life gets hard, let me leave and let me remove myself from the equation. Um, Now, I want to caveat this conversation, this series, and say this is that this conversation is expressly geared towards men and their children. Uh, I'm a proponent of marriage. However, I know a lot of men who aren't married to the mother of their children for whatever reason, but they do a good job as a father. Okay. And so they understand the significance of their role. They don't let the status of the relationship between them and their mother, the children's mother, invalidate the kids. Okay. And so, with that being said, I want to dive into what we're going to talk about on this evening um, with respect to this conversation of fatherlessness. Now, last week, and I said that this week we would deal with this, but last week I said that fatherlessness is not just the physical absence of a father. Um, an emotionally unavailable father can cause just as much harm as the father who is not there physically. Two of the greatest responsibilities that a father has is demonstration and validation. Okay. Now, demonstration, as a father, we are to serve as the measuring stick of manhood for our children. I myself, I have two sons. A part of my responsibility is to demonstrate what their inherent potential looks like. They are not men yet, but the potential for what they will become is already inside of them. And so, what I need to do as a father, I need to model what it looks like uh, to be a man, and I also need to teach them uh, what it is that they're becoming. I don't have any daughters, but I would say similar rules apply for men who are the father of daughters. We are to model the character of what we hope that their future husbands will look like. The second thing, as it relates to these 2 points, validation. As a father, we are to affirm that our children matter. I shared this last week, but before Jesus even began his earthly ministry, as a Christian, the foundation of my faith is rooted in this man Jesus Christ. But even before he began his earthly ministry, God the Father said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I'm well pleased." In essence, that statement, that is God the Father validating His Son, and the validation was not predicated upon what Jesus was doing. was predicated on the relationship. This is my son. And because this is my son, I'm well pleased. And once again, this was well before Jesus Christ began to do anything as it relates to all of the miracles and ultimately his reason for being here. Uh, the emotionally unavailable father rationalizes that their being around is enough. They tell themselves that, hey, just because I'm here, and that's enough. That's all you need. Just the fact that I'm around. And they tell themselves that their being around is the proof that they love the kid, that they love their children. Now, here's the danger of the emotionally unavailable father. The child grows up to question their own sense of self worth because of the absence of validation, and they learn to accept this as a norm because of the demonstration. This is what they saw, so this is what they accept, and this is what they believe. So they lack the validation, and now they believe that, hey, you know what? This is not what we do. I said this before, and I'll say it a million times over. Many men have had to become what they didn't have because their measuring stick for manhood was defined by something broken. Um, I'll use this as an example. Uh, my father and I, we have a great relationship. My dad, that's my guy right there. Not only is he my father, but I consider him to be a friend as well. But this has not always been the case between my father and I. I actually used to think when I was growing up, I used to think that my father didn't like me, truth be told. Um, and the reason why I say that is because in my household, we didn't do emotions. That wasn't what we did in the pagan's household. And so once again, that speaks to demonstration and validation. So there was always this question. I didn't know how to, really approach it, because I was scared. But ultimately, I learned that, hey, this is just the way it is. It actually wasn't until I turned 24 and I was getting ready to go on my first deployment. At the time, I was in the military, getting ready to go to Iraq. And I remember, that at the age of 24, that's actually the first time I can remember hearing my father say that I love you. And this doesn't mean that he never said it before, but it does speak to the culture of my upbringing. Now, I want to highlight something. I asked my dad, some time later, I said, hey, uh, why is it that you never, articulated that you love me? And he said that, his dad never told him. Now, here's that demonstration thing. He said that his dad never told him. And so some years later, my father, he himself had this conversation with my granddad, with his dad. And my grandfather told him that he never heard it growing up. And so what you have is that, once again, in essence, you have this demonstration that this is just the way we do things. But you have a generation and generations of men who question their own relationship within the scope of how their own father views them. Um, I did an examination of all the men in my family, not just my immediate family, but my brothers, cousins, uncles, my dad, and once again, my late grandfather. And the majority of us struggle in the area of being emotionally available. And I myself, as the father of two sons, I've made a point, and I make it an emphasis to let my children know that I love them. But I myself, often struggle with the old nature. I struggle with, that thing that I learned growing up, as it relates to being able to emote with my own children. Uh, Now I sit here as a 42-year-old man, thankful that that generational curse is ended, and the remnants of it are no longer what defines my family. However, once again, there are times when that thing attempts to revisit my family. There are times when we be like, "Hey, man, yeah, you know how I feel about you, whatever." But long story short. It's no longer connected to the fact that we find it weird or odd to be able to tell one another how we feel about each other. And I want to say that we as men, we're going to have to get over that hurdle that keeps us from being able to emotionally connect with our children. And I'm not just talking about the mushy feeling type stuff. We have to be able to show our children how to handle life when life happens. And when you're emotionally unavailable, what ends up happening is everybody thinks that you're this robot, you're this autonomous thing, that nothing gets to you. And the reality is that when the pressures of life hit the children and they don't respond accordingly, they're going to think that, hey, you know what? My dad, he never showed me how to deal with this. And I don't know why this is bothering me the way that it is. And I don't know what to do with what it is that I'm feeling. And the reason that is that they did not have the demonstration. The model who was in the house never showed them how to handle life. And so what you end up having is you have a lot of young people, a lot of young men who are giving up on life because once again, they don't know how to process their stuff. I'm getting ready to close. One of the things that I'm going to do in this series is I'm going to be mindful of the time. However, before I do close, I want to share an excerpt from my book. Once again, Dear Son, and a lot of the material that we're going to be covering in this series comes from this book. And last week, we closed with the voice of the absentee father. And this week, we will close with the voice of the distant father. The distant father. So, son, everything that I have done is for you. I know that you have heard this before and you're probably tired of hearing it, but my heart has always been towards providing for you. Unfortunately, I never considered the fact that provision goes beyond paying the bills. There were missed games, neglected talks, and a lack of overall availability. I wish I slowed down long enough to ask you how your day was. I wish my heart would let me turn down those extra hours of overtime in order for me to be present with you. I can only imagine how many times I've let you down, and for that, I truly apologize. You vied for my attention, and that was something you should never have had to compete for. Now that you're older, I realize how fast time really moves, and I wish that I could start over again. I want to give you this book, and I hope it serves as a type of heart to heart conversation that I failed to have with you. I'm here for you, son, the distant father. One of the things that I'm as a father, as a husband, and as a father, one of the things that I am reconciling within myself is that my family shouldn't always be the one that has to make the sacrifice. There's a lot of things that I do, and all of them are rooted in my desire to be a provider, a good provider for my family. But at the expense of that provision, I've been asking my family to sacrifice the relational component with me. And the reality is that as a father, as a man, the leader of my household, it shouldn't be them that has to make the sacrifice. It should be me making the sacrifice by finding the way to balance uh, my role as a provider and my role as the leader in the household. I actually find those two roles to be synonymous with one another. But we as men, we have to get away from um, causing our kids to sacrifice what they need in the right now. Because what ends up happening is that if we're not careful, our voice actually ends up becoming like the voice of a stranger. And imagine someone looking just like you, feeling like a stranger to you. And so the emotionally unavailable father, in essence, becomes the stranger in his own house. He's the stranger in his own house because he does not know how, or not that he doesn't know how, but he has not been making that connection with his children. I want to ask you to do me a huge favor. If this has helped you and you see the value of it, I ask that you share this message with other men, other people dealing with the wounds of fatherlessness. I want to also ask that you visit www.dearson.net. If you're watching this message, you'll actually see it scrolling across the bottom. But once again, that's dearson.net. And I want to ask that you purchase your copy of this book, Dear Son, The Words of a Father to the Heart of a Son. I trust and I really do believe that this book will impact your life in such a very profound way. If you're on this particular link, dearson.net, you have the option of either it's going to direct you either to my online store where you can get your signed copy of a book, or to actually direct you to the Amazon store where the book is available in audiobook, paperback, as well as the Kindle version. But men, we have a huge responsibility, and our responsibility is to heal. As we heal, so will our communities. But once again, it's incumbent upon us making that step. Healing doesn't just happen over the course of time. There has to be an intentional system that we put in place that's going to cultivate the process of healing. One of the things I tell people all the time, a wound, a broken arm is not going to heal just because time has elapsed. You have to have that arm set, reset, put in the position. You're going to have to rehab it. You're going to have to avoid, putting any pressure, doing anything over with that arm or that appendage. But the reality is that, in the process of that system, you're going to experience healing. But a lot of us are not doing anything. And so these emotional wounds, they keep, it's almost like a scab. We keep picking it and we keep re-exposing it because we never did anything to get whole in that area. And so I want to say this. Thank you all once again for joining us. Tonight's conversation was around the premise of the distant father. Once again, the unemotionally available dad. And so men, the reality is that we shouldn't have to allow our children to question where they stand with us, how we feel about them. We can break that curse. If this has been your narrative, if this has been an example that speaks to your own upbringing, I want to encourage you to change it. But I also want to encourage you for yourself to get whole in that area, and so that there won't be any more lingering remnants of what it feels like to not know how your father feels about you. Once again, I want to say thank you all. Please join me next week, Sunday at 8 p.m. We're going to keep this going. This is Overcoming the Epidemic of Fatherlessness. Hey, God bless you. Thank you.
There is a prevailing crisis that has crippled families and communities for decades. This crisis has a direct association to higher crime rates, increased poverty, and cost the nation millions of dollars annually. The crisis is the epidemic of fatherlessness. What would the world look like if fathers were not only physically present, but emotionally available as well? What would the conversation between the repentant father and the dejected son sound like? Recognizing that sons, both young and old, need to hear a heart of a father serves as the motivation for this literary work. This book is for those who need wisdom and guidance, never had those necessary moments with their father, or wish they had more moments with their father. Through the affirmation of a father's love, this book will traverse the difficult path from disappointment to hope, and from alienation to reconciliation.